Why is one drug illegal and the other legal? Who decides that, and why is it decided? This starts back at 1880. In 1880, United States and China came to an accord that said they would no longer transport or trade opium. This was the beginning of the whole process. In 1906, the Drug and Food Act came out. This required that medications had to be properly labeled. They targeted cannabis products and narcotic products because there were so many tainted products on the market at the time. Now, a few years later, Prohibition came along. And during Prohibition, there was a lockdown on many substances. It wasn't just alcohol. It included narcotics, and it also included your cannabis products, included all of them. But Prohibition failed miserably. And what it really did was spread crime and cause problems. But during Prohibition, there was a man. His name was Henry Jacob Anslinger. Anslinger was the first commissioner of the Federal Narcotics Board. He also got to be in that position for over 30 years. During that 30 years, he formed most of the opinions and came up with most of the drugs which were illegal versus legal. Many were decided without good scientific evidence. So let's talk about Mr. Anslinger. So, Mr. Anslinger, when he was 17, dropped out of high school. He worked in a railroad town and didn't get his high school degree. He was allowed to continue to working on underneath a tutoring ship. He did end up going to Penn State and getting a 2-year degree a few years later in business. At that point, he started working for the railroad. He gained notoriety because there was a widow that said that her husband had died during a railroad accident and sued for $50,000. He found that that was a false claim and saved $50,000 from that. He jettisoned into the world of taking care of drug problems across the world. So they sent him out to other countries. He helped stop the trade of opium in and out of the United States. He was also a huge supporter of Prohibition, huge supporter of Prohibition. But when he came back from all of his world travels, Prohibition was on the tail end. But he got named the commissioner of the Narcotic Bureau. When he got named the commissioner of the Narcotic Division, he took a special interest in cannabis for some reason. Now keep in mind, later in life, Mr. Anslinger actually provided opium and morphine to Senator John McCarthy for years from the division. That's where he got it. He supplied it to the senator. So he was okay with morphine later in life, but he still hated cannabis. But during those years, he formed many opinions. Here's the thing about Mr. Anslinger that we should know. He was a bigot and a racist. You should see some of the stuff this guy says. Like, it is crazy, the stuff that he said. He also ignored scientific community for years and years and years. In 1937, they came out with the Marijuana Tax Act. When they came out with the Marijuana Tax Act, there was 95% of pharmacists and doctors said, don't do this. There was legitimate use for cannabis. But Mr. Anslinger actually destroyed all of that evidence and only kept the 5% that he agreed with. On that same time, every time he talked about cannabis, he always brought up minority groups and how it caused the minority groups to get riled up. It was incredible, the things that this guy said, and he formed policy for 30 years about illegal versus legal drugs. So when somebody asks, how does a drug move from being illegal to legal or legal to illegal, up until 1962, it was basically on this guy's shoulder. For 30 years, he made those decisions, and we have adopted many of his opinions all the way through. So what do I think? I think that drugs should be done the way they are now, which is they take scientific evidence and see if the risk versus benefit is appropriate to have it be legal or illegal. However, everything previous to 1962 was on the back of a man who we should never take advice from.